basically the entire political establishment in the United States is expressing outrage over the likely murder of Alexei Navalny by Putin or by those associated with him. I mean, there have been multiple attempts on Navalny's life. He is was the number one critic of Putin in Russian public life, and he had his own problems and problematic ties to, say, anti-Muslim racism and things like that. But it doesn't take away from like the deeply troubling and scary persecution and circumstances that Vladimir Putin's government has created within Russian society. So there are two things that can be true at once. Like Nancy Pelosi posing with Alexei Navalny's widow is clear propaganda for the United States, and it's also an indicator as to how truly repugnant this Putin regime is.
Yeah, and I'll just add, we started yesterday with the context of the Julian Assange case. No American has any right, in my opinion, to lament Navalny if they are supportive of what's happening, what America's doing to Assange.
Yes. They're similar in
their character doesn't matter, right? It's like they are persecuted by major states on this planet because they exposed things and were dissidents, frankly. And yeah.
I don't think that's a complicated notion that people can grasp here.
There's a wider principle.
Exactly.
There are wider principles at stake here.
Exactly. So putting that aside, right? As I said, basically the entire political class is expressing outrage about this in the United States, with the exception of a few. Republicans. J.D. Vance is leading the fight in the Senate to not send any more money to Ukraine. Other Republicans who are trying to fashion themselves as paleo-conservatives, whatever the hell that really means in practice, are
conservatives that like dinosaurs? No,
yes.
Unfortunately, it's not that. It's about racism.
It would be so much cooler. But they're either silent or kind of stepping around this topic. Trump, though, decided that he finally should address it. And on Truth Social and during a town hall last night, he compared his legal battles in the United States to Navalny, again, who was just killed almost certainly by his own government.
Like
just exactly like me. And that's so silly. It barely requires, any kind of rebuttal. But Nikki Haley is getting increasingly desperate because the South Carolina primary is on Saturday. She is down by a margin of 2-1 in her home state, where she was the governor, the executive of that state in that position. She's down 2-1 to Donald Trump, and she's still raising money. Reportedly, she's been fundraising in Texas, raking in the millions. And I think it's reflective in the way that she is kind of steering her opposition to Trump here. This was her at a rally yesterday in South Carolina, trying to differentiate herself from Trump here by supporting Alexei Navalny and not supporting Putin. Here she goes speaking to this one is her speaking to Martha McCallum. There's a second one. Let's do the second one, then we'll do this as well, because she kind of just hints at it here in the speech in South Carolina, and then she gets a little bit more explicit on Fox News. So, yeah, speaking in Greenville, South Carolina, she alludes to Russia when speaking about Trump.
But 10 days after South Carolina, another 21 states and territories will vote. People have a right to have their voices heard. And they deserve a real choice, not a Soviet-style election where there's only one candidate and he gets 99% of the vote.
What's funny about that is that it's actually quite literally not a Soviet-style election in the way that she's trying to allude. The voters in the Republican base have made their preference incredibly clear. Putting aside the jingoism that is just so inherent, like, what she's alluding to is that it's a rigged election. Oh, yeah. Are you trying to claim that it's rigged in favor of Donald Trump? I've got news for you. There is absolutely zero evidence that would show that. And is she claiming that?
Yeah, this is like, where's our managed democracy at?
Yes.
Why is there no room for the backroom candidate that all the power elites choose?
What is she talking about? The Republican field just narrowed down from a bunch of nobodies that no one cared about. If it was an election that, was just about coronating Donald Trump, Soviet style, as she'd say, again, a not so subtle allusion to Russia here, then none of those candidates would have been running. No, the reality is that they all dropped out because they ran out of money after their donors figured out this is going to be Trump and the Republican base doesn't want anybody else. So, in fact, it's democracy at work. But then again, she went on Fox News with Martha McCallum and was a little bit more explicit in just tying Trump to Russia.
In terms of the former president talking about himself, he did that when he raised this question about what he thought about the killing of Alexei Navalny, which I know is a situation that you have watched very closely in Russia. And it's not, just about the tragic death that he suffered. It's about the implications of Putin's plans for other people. There are 2 Americans that are being held. Put that back up again. He said the sudden death of Alexei Navalny has made me more and more aware of what's happening in our country. It is a slow, steady progression with crooked, radical left politicians and prosecutors and judges. What do you think about that, Governor?
That just makes my point. It's amazing that here's a hero who challenged Putin, lost his life because of it. This is on the heels of Trump saying that he would encourage Putin to invade any NATO countries that didn't pull their weight. And now the only comment he's going to make about Navalny is not hitting Putin for murdering him, not praising Navalny for fighting the corruption that was happening in Russia, but instead he's going to compare himself to Navalny and the victim that he is in his court cases. That is my point. He is so distracted. He is so focused on himself. And America can't go through this. We won't survive it. He's going to spend this entire year in a courtroom. There is a reason Biden and the Democrats so desperately want Trump to be the candidate for the Republican Party. It's because they know they can beat him. They've beat him multiple times over and over again. We need to start saying, what does it take to win? Because we can't fix this country if we don't win.
She has a point there, but you can't do anything if you don't win, Nikki. So the bind that Republicans are in, and the only thing saving them is the fact that Biden is an octogenarian who keeps slurring his words and making mistakes and is supporting a genocide and running to the right on the border and doing everything possible to alienate the base that he needs to win this election, which I'm praying he does, because God forbid another Trump term. It's scary. But what is she doing here? I've got... Think about this for a second. This was Hillary Clinton's strategy in 2016 in the general election from the Democratic side, talking about how Trump is connected to Russia. Trump and Russia, Trump and Russia. Now, there is some appetite for that in an MSNBC viewing base, right? They don't like Russia. They get energized by the rivalry, the kind of Cold War framework that they apply to it. And those are usually older liberals that are going to vote Democrat anyway. What Republican voter, is there one in the country that is swayed by Donald Trump not being vocal about the killing of Alexei Navalny? Which one? Because it's the donors that she's talking to. Yeah. She's spending all of her time raising as much money as she can so she can get through South Carolina and still run on Super Tuesday, when she will get demolished then, and the race will will be mathematically completely over at that point, as opposed to just over in principle. So this is indicative of a huge disconnect that Republicans voters also don't like, which is the sense that she is in a room with a bunch of donors talking about Alexei Navalny and, hey, we're trying to stop these Mexican rapists from coming over the border here, Nikki. This is our thing. Yeah. So this is just not something that is going to work at all. And Tim Scott was saying yesterday that Nikki Haley is desperate. That's true. Tim Scott would know. But I wish that she was going out with a little bit more of a spicy kind of attack than something that just got recycled from her friends over at Boeing.
Well, Trump shows that he like their incoherence, because it's like you can't, like I said, the Assange thing. If you support the persecution of Assange because he exposed American war crimes, you can't be us. Nobody is. There's going to be nobody here for your champion of other dissidents. It just doesn't make sense. So Trump, actually, he's not being silent about Navalny. He's saying he's saying like I'm him.
I'm him,
and that's as coherent as what Nikki Haley
says.
says.
Yes, right, exactly. So. It's she's keeping going for some reason. Again,
well, you got
she's the
payroll.
Fourth round quarterback starting at the end of the year on this team that's going 5-12 or something like that. Seeing if she can be the starter in 2028.
She might have a Kurt Warner moment.
Yeah, from bagging groceries to funding a genocide. That's the Nikki Haley experience.